Okay, so we're going to talk about knives today. We're going to talk about knife safety, we're going to talk about different kinds of knives, and we're going to talk about different ways of cutting things. So I've got the sheet there in front of you. You've got it in front of you. It's on your Google Classroom as well. And this has a bunch of different varieties of knife cuts, and these are actual size. Okay, so when we're working today, when you're cutting, you can actually take the pieces that you're cutting, you can lay them on the sheet. I've got lots of them. Feel free to get the piece of paper dirty. You can get one dirty and then grab another one at the end of class, no problem at all. But this will help you. It'll be a nice reference for you, and so you'll know whether or not you maybe need to cut something smaller or bigger or different size or thing. Okay, let's talk about different kinds of knives before we go any further. So we have a whole selection here now. Knives in the kitchen, most important tool that you've got. Okay, 85% of the time you've got a knife in your hand. This is what we use all the time. When you are getting hired for a job in a kitchen, this is what they're judging you on, okay? If I get hired, if I apply for a job in an industrial kitchen, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna go in and I'll do the whole resume thing and interviews and all that kind of thing, but then they'll invite you in for a cooking test. So what they'll do is you'll come in, you'll bring your knives, and they'll do a black box. Do you guys know what a black box is? So a black box is, if you ever watch those cooking shows on TV where they, there's the three contestants and they put a box in front of them and they open it up. It's like, today we're cooking with squid heads, and then you got to do something with that. That's what they'll do, but not with squid heads, obviously. But they'll give you a box of ingredients. So they're a little basket or something, some vegetables and some meats and this kind of thing. And they'll say, cook me something. Show me what you can do. When they're doing that, of course they're going to taste the food at the end. They want to see what things are going to be like, what your flavoring ability is like. But really what they're looking at how you work. Are you working clean? Do you know how to set up a knife station? Do you know how to cut things properly? I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about today is onions, right? You want to judge right away if somebody has cooking experience in an industrial kitchen, ask them to cut you an onion. Because I can tell you that I've worked in places where we've hired people and they said, yes, I have lots and lots of cooking experience. But then we go to and we watch them cut an onion. It's like, you've never stepped foot in an industrial kitchen. There's no way. Okay, which is why we're going to have our lesson today. But let's talk about different knives now. So let's start with these two here. These are kind of variations on the same knife. So this, when I say the chef knife, this is the knife you're going to have in your hand most of the time. Okay, you can do most of your jobs with this knife, especially if you get really good and you're very comfortable using knives. Okay, so this is the European version. So this is called a French knife or a chef's knife. It's got a nice curved blade here. Okay, the reason for that is that when I'm using this knife a lot of the time is I'm going to be rocking it. Okay, and the curved blade gives me a little easier time when I'm rocking my blade. Okay, the thickness of the blade starts quite thick. And it gets down to a very thin tip so that I can, if I can use the tip for very fine cutting, or if I have to chop through something really thick, I can use this end of the knife. Okay. This one is a little bit different. It's called a Santoku. This is kind of the Japanese version, okay? Also a great knife. A lot of people are using them these days. It does have a curve in the blade, but not quite as pronounced, okay? You can rock it and that kind of thing, but it is really very similar to this one here. This one also has these divots in the edge of the blade, okay? And those are designed to, if you're cutting something like potatoes, where they're very, very wet, and sometimes after the second slice through the potatoes, you've got potatoes that are sticking to the side of your blade. It becomes very annoying. That's designed to allow a little air to get in between the potato and the blade, and it helps it to loosen up those potatoes, so you're not going to have that problem anymore. Okay. So that is the chef knife, the Santoku. These are the knives you're going to have in your hand probably the most often. Okay. Let's look at this one here. So this is a boning knife, or sometimes called a filleting knife. Okay, it's a bit of a different shape. It's kind of straight, and it's got also like a little sort of curved tip to it. When you're using this one, you're probably using about the last third of the blade when you're cutting. Okay, because you're not doing slicing. You're using this one to take the meat off of bones. Okay, so sometimes you're going to be holding it like this, and depending, if I'm working, they use these in slaughterhouses, they use these in butcher shops where they're getting in half a cow. So sometimes you'll be holding it like this, the classic dagger hold, and you'll have a piece of meat hanging here, and you'll be like cutting things off like this. Okay. Usually, the really sharp part of the knife is going to be this part here. One of the other interesting things about this knife is that it's flexible. Okay. The reason being that meat is expensive. Okay. when I'm cooking with meat, I have to make sure that I'm not going to waste anything. So remember, when we're talking about cooking in this class, we're talking about cooking as a business, okay? We don't want to waste time, we don't want to waste money, we don't want to waste products. So what I'm going to do, what this knife allows me to do is it allows me to press right up against bone and get right in there and get all the meat off of it, okay? This is a little bit flexible. If I have one that's specially designed for fish, this blade will be very thin and I can just take my hand and just do this with it, okay? Mind you, when you do, that's a very sharp knife. You have to be very, very careful when you do, okay? So yeah, filleting knife or butcher knife, some people call it. Now, let's take a look at this guy. This is big scary one, the cleaver, okay? You'll see different kinds of these knives. Now, this is a European style cleaver, the same. This one is really, like you can see how thick that blade is, okay? And if I bring this over to you, lift it, okay? It's like a 2-pound knife, but it's a heavy knife, right? Most knives that you're using in the kitchen are designed to be really comfortable in your hand, really easy to use, because it's got to be like an extension of your arm, right? This one is super heavy, and there's a reason for that, okay? I'm going to use this blade to cut through things that are big or tough to cut through. Now, I don't ever, like I guess I could use this knife, but that would involve me doing this, and coming down really hard and heavy on it, right? And I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to work my arm back like this, because who knows who's standing behind me when I'm working in a kitchen. Like, when we're working here in this kitchen, we have lots and lots of space, not just because of COVID. This is a big kitchen by any standards, okay, for the number of people that we have in here. If I'm working in a normal industrial kitchen, it's a lot tighter space, okay? Which means that you're working really closely physically to other people. Here, somebody will be working here. If we're working on one of these tables here, we'll have maybe 4 people working on each table, okay? So I can't be doing stuff like where I'm hauling back with my knife, because it's just dangerous, right? Because this is heavy, what this allows us to do, this allows us to cut through big, heavy things without coming back like this, because we have the weight of the knife. It's going to help us do the cutting. So basically, you start here and just go and hammer it down really, really hard and cut through big, thick pieces of meat. Sometimes you have to hack through bone, this kind of thing. I have one of these in my toolkit for when I'm helping friends in restaurants and stuff. I use this for lobster, for cracking lobster bones, and it's basically the only thing I use it for these days. Okay. All right. Some of these two. So these two knives are kind of very long, very similar shaped. Okay. And they can be the same. These two just happen to be, one just happens to be longer. They can be the same length. So let's talk about this guy first. Do you guys know what this one is called? Any ideas?
Bread knife?
Yeah, we call it a bread knife a lot of the time. And that's we could also call it a serrated knife, but we call it a bread knife because that's where we see it used most often. Okay, we use it to cut bread. The reason we're using it to cut bread is because those little teeth are great for getting through crust, bread crust, okay? They're also really good for cutting soft things. So you don't only use this for bread. You can use it for anything that's soft. The thing that you see used a lot with is tomatoes. If I try, if I have a really beautiful ripe tomato that's a little bit soft and very juicy, I can use this knife. But if it's not super, super sharp, what I'm going to end up doing is just squishing the tomato rather than cutting through the skin, okay? So if I have to cut a lot of tomatoes, if I have to cut like 5 or 6 cases of tomatoes, I'm going to use this guy here because I don't have to worry about my knife getting dull and I don't have to worry about getting through the skin. Keep in mind, whenever we're once again, soft things, okay? But bread a lot because a lot of the sandwich breads and things that we're using are very, very soft. Now, you have this guy now, which is a slicing knife, very long blade, okay? Very straight, very sharp, okay? What I'm going to use this for is when I want to make a cut that is, if I'm cutting with this blade, I might do a little bit of a saw. When I'm using my bread knife, obviously I'm going to saw because it looks like a saw. With this one, the idea is I'm going to make a long cut. I'm going to make one swoop like this, and I'm done cutting. So, an example of when I would use this is if, say, I'm cutting something like a smoked salmon or a brown black, and I want to make one perfect little cut. Another example is if I'm working on a buffet. So, I'm working and I'm serving meat to like 1,000 people, and I've got one of those little stations like at the Mandarin where the guy's got all the roasts. Okay, so the idea is somebody comes up, they're like, oh, I would like some roast beef. And you're like, oh, yes, sir, I'll be very happy to get some roast beef there. So what you do is you make one cut, and it makes you look very professional. okay? And then you take that and you see how that's dull, okay? I've got a dull tip on here. You see how this is dull. You can cut the meat, and then you can take this and you can put it on the customer's plate. Thank you. It is very long, right? So you can reach right over, put it on the customer's plate. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Okay. Another kind of knife that we're using. Got these two guys here. These are two small knives. Now, these other knives that we've been talking about so far are large knives, okay? And whenever we're using large knives, we're always going to use them in a cutting board, okay? We're always going to be cutting on a cutting board because it's safe, okay? This knife is big, and because it's big, I don't want to cut in my hands to do things. Okay? Now, with these guys are small, and they're designed to be used in your hand, okay? Because it's so small, you can wrap your hand right around it, you have amazing control over this knife, okay? It's great. So what we have here is a paring knife. You probably have these at home. It's for cutting small things in my hand. So I can use this to, maybe if I'm trimming carrots or something, I can use it to cut little radishes into fancy little shapes, to take the tops off of strawberries, that kind of thing. I mean, sometimes I'll hold it by the knife, by the handle like this, or sometimes I'll even choke all the way up like this. If I'm taking the tops off of tomatoes, I'll literally just hold it like this, right? But because it's so small, because it's so light, I'm not worried about cutting myself. You know, if I try to hold just the tip on this knife, it's very, very awkward, right? Another knife that I got that's also small that I will use sometimes is this. It's called a bird's beak or turning knife. Now, if you look at your little sheet there of different vegetable cuts, down sort of the bottom right, you're going to see like a football shape. It's called tournée. This is only for cutting that shape. That's what this knife is designed for. Okay? And if you look at that shape, it's weird. It's got 7 sides. And so basically what you're cutting is you're cutting a little football shape about this long. This particular vegetable cut, this is a mark of a skill in a chef, right? I'm going to call this a knife, okay? This is a peeler, okay? Once again, we're using it in our hands, okay? We have a lot of control over it. It's designed so you can hold it really, really well. You've got this little bit here on the end. What this is going to do is this is going to allow you to take the little eyes out of potatoes and that kind of thing, okay? But this is a knife, make no mistake. Okay? I have cut myself really, really well on these things. Now, you see this is a cheap one. This is the kind of thing you'll find if you go to a kitchen supply store, they'll have it right beside the cash register, you know, those little suggested buys that cost you 99 cents. It'll last you for a couple of months and you will buy a new one sort of thing. Because it's kind of hard to sharpen these little blades. I mean, these little blades come out, okay? And if you could just buy a bag of blades, that'd be great, but nobody seems to sell them, which is very frustrating. But make no mistake, this is really, really sharp. I mean, the plastic thing for me is, if I'm not being careful, is I'll take off some of my fingernail. Okay? And oh my God. I don't know if you've ever cut off a piece of your fingernail by accident. It's really, all the skin underneath there is so sensitive. And then you're stuck in the kitchen all day long reaching into containers of salt and squeezing lemon juice on the things. And it's just like, oh my God, this is so much pain. Believe me, when you're working in kitchens, you have a new appreciation for the levels of pain that the human body can experience. I don't mean to scare anybody away from the kitchen, but I'm surprised now at the level of discomfort that I can accommodate myself every day when I'm working. This is a steel, okay? So you'll see these things. This one's kind of, if I look at the end of this, it's kind of a bit of a football shape. You can get them to the round as well. And this is basically a big iron file. Now, we're not using this to cut. What we're doing is we're using this to keep a sharp edge on our knife, okay? So your knife, if you look at it under a microscope, actually looks like this. It looks like your serrated knife. So what you have is you have some teeth on it like this, okay? So, nice and, when the teeth are like this, nice and sharp. But as I make this motion, as I'm doing my cutting, what happens is those teeth get pushed down, okay? And as they flatten, what that means is my knife isn't as sharp anymore. So what I need to do is I need to use this thing, I'm gonna push these teeth back up again, okay? So I'm going like this, and I'm pushing the teeth back up again. So what I need to do here is I'm gonna take my knife, I'm going to put it against the edge of my blade. Now I'm going to match up the bottom of my knife with the bottom of my steel. And when I'm done one stroke, I should be matching the tip of my steel and this tip of my knife. So I'm going to do that at about a 30-degree angle. Come up one side, come up the other side. And I go back and forth like this, okay? And what this is doing is it's pushing those teeth, those little microscopic teeth on my knife back up again. Now, when you do this, everybody holds their knife at a little bit of a different angle. So I always recommend that you don't let somebody else sharpen your knives. If you have knives that you own and are working with in the kitchen every day, you should be sharpening your own knife. Because even if you're holding it at the wrong angle, as long as you're consistently holding it on the wrong angle, it'll still sharpen your knife. But if somebody else goes to sharpen your knife or goes to hone your knife for you, you're not gonna, it'll ruin the blade. You'll just have to get it sharpened again. So that's actually what we call honing the blade. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about here is I want to talk about knife safety. Okay, so you guys did a little bit of safety and sanitation stuff in your class before this. Now, here I have a knife. Okay, what I should be doing here is like if I'm moving around the kitchen, okay, then I'm always going to hold my knife by the handle. Okay. When I'm moving around the kitchen, I'm going to put the knife at my side. The point of the knife, the tip of the knife is pointing down, and the edge of the knife, the sharp part of the knife is pointing backwards, okay? Because I never walk backwards in the kitchen, it's dangerous, okay? So I'm walking forwards. This way, if I'm walking forwards, I've got control of the knife, I know where it is, and if I run into something, the part of the knife that's going to run into the thing, into the table or into somebody, is going to be the not sharp part of the knife, okay? That's going to, that'll keep the person safe, it'll keep my table safe, and it'll prevent me from putting it into my knife or making my knife not sharp, okay? So, at my side, point down, the edge to the back, okay? So I come over here to my station, okay? Now, when I'm cutting on a cutting board, the problem I have is I'm cutting, I need to put things on my cutting board, and I need to put some pressure on. So I'm cutting, what's going to happen is this is going to happen. The board is going to slide around, okay? So in order to prevent that from happening, I'm going to take a towel, I'm going to go over here to the sink, and get my towel nice and wet. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to squeeze out as much of that water as possible. So one of the neat things about this is, what I'll do is I'll keep this off to the side. Like this, spread that out underneath. Put my cutting board on top, and now that's not going to go anywhere. In fact, the more pressure that I put on that board, the more easily that it's going to stick to the table, okay? So the other thing I always want to have on hand when I'm doing my cutting is I want to have a bowl, okay? Now, we're fortunate / unfortunate in that we all have our own table to work with because of COVID, we're social distancing, and that's great, we have lots of room. Normally, it's not the case. Normally you're going to be sharing a table like this with 4 other people. And as you're cutting things, so I'm cutting this, I've got, maybe I'm going to peel my onion. I don't want to have to take my peel, find a garbage can, dump it, and then come back for more peel, and back and forth and back and forth. It takes a lot of time. So what I'll have, in the middle of the table, I have 4 people working. I'll have one of these bowls in the middle. We'll all use this for our waste products, and when it's like heaping full, somebody will go empty it, and we'll come back, and it just saves a lot of time. Because remember, talking about cooking as a business, we're taking this course. So saving time, saving money, saving resources. So I want to have one of these guys. Okay. Other safety things. Always want to make sure that my knife is really, really sharp. Always going to check that before we start. The other thing is when I'm cutting, okay, always on a cutting board, okay? Now, if I take my knife and I use it on one of these metal tables, it's like, oh, I just need to cut this couple of things, and I go a couple of cuts like this. I just use metal on metal, and the blade, the edge of my knife is gone. Okay, it's happens very, very quickly. So it's not a great way to treat your knife. I mean, if you spent $100 on a knife, and if you end up going to George Brown or something like that, you'll buy a knife kit, you'll spend like $150 on it. And because you spend a lot of money on it, you want to take care of that knife, right? So you don't want to use it on a piece of metal. The other thing I hate when people see people doing is somebody comes over and they use it on one of our beautiful wooden tables here. Now these wooden tables are great, and they are made of wood, okay? A lot of cutting boards are made of wood, so people will make the assumption that, oh, it'll be okay if I just do a couple of cuts on here. Now, the nice thing about these cutting boards is that I can take this, I can pick it up, and I can take it over to my dishwashing station, okay? So you guys talked about safety and sanitation in your last unit. This is great because it fits through my dishwashing machine. My dishwashing machine is awesome because it's using lots of chemicals, it's using really hot water. I mean, really hot water, right? That dishwasher actually boosts up the temperature of hot tap water by about 20 or 30 degrees. That's why those dishes are so hot when they come out of the dishwasher. So it's exceptionally good at killing those pathogens that might be on our cutting board, right?